Welcome to the latest in the series of Somerford Associates podcasts, where we sort of focus on a range of issues relating to cybersecurity, almost just more broadly, contemporary issues of interest. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Rob Finn, the Head of International Sales from Chainguard. Rob, welcome.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. So, Chainguard, a cybersecurity company that focuses on securing the software supply chain, correct?
Yeah.
More or less?
Yeah, more or less,
Okay.
yeah. I think the mission is we want to be the safe source for open source.
Okay, why?
Look, I mean, open source it's a patchwork of outdated systems, of repos, of build tools that people are using to build their apps today. And now ultimately, you know, they're maintainers and individual contributors who are really maintaining that software today. And I guess over the years, it's introduced vulnerabilities, it's introduced malware. And so we want a new approach to building open source to make sure it's secure by default.
Okay. You've been in the cybersecurity business for some time, a history of companies I won't go through on this time. What made you choose Chainguard?
Yeah, good question. So what I liked about the approach, if I look at some of the previous companies I've worked for, there's always an operationalization that's required when you think about cybersecurity, traditional cybersecurity tools, and that generally delays an ROI. What was very appealing about Chainguard was really twofold. One was it solved what I think is still one of the biggest friction points for most organizations, which is developer velocity and making sure that software is secure. And secondly, it did it in a very unique approach. We're not a traditional cybersecurity tool. We turn it on its head. We fix it before it's broken. So today, people are downloading the latest versions of Python from a Docker hub, and it has vulnerabilities in it inherently. What we're doing is pulling that same image from source, rebuilding it, minimizing it, making sure there are no known CVEs in it, and then redistributing that. So people don't need to worry about scanning their software and noisy cybersecurity tools. We're just going to give them an image that doesn't have that security, those vulnerabilities in at day one.
Reducing risk and...
Reducing risk is the obvious one, but I think if you think about sort of any organization building software at scale, they're depending on whether they're in a regulated industry or whether infrastructure is sort of critical for their business, they're going to care about if I release something into production that has a critical or a high CV in it, for example. And so what we see is organizations are slowing the velocity of new products and features because they're using open source images that have these CVs in it inherently. And so there's developer velocity, there's reduced engineering toll, as well as obviously that decreased attack surface, therefore risk and compliance.
You mentioned developer velocity a couple of times. Can you expand on that?
So one of the challenges that organizations tell us today, and I'm going to generalize here a little bit, but what we hear from organizations is engineers are spending something like 20% of their time on what we term unplanned work. So it's, they're in a sprint, they want to deploy a new product or a new feature, and all of a sudden something comes up. They've either got to fix a piece of software or the security team has scanned it and said, hey, you've got a vulnerability in here and that needs to be fixed or patched. So that takes away from them actually building and deploying. And so what we're doing is giving them a clean image, a secure by default image without those CVEs in it. So Chainguard, we own that. We own the SLA to ensure that that image doesn't have CVEs in it. And so we can give time back to developers so they don't have to stop and go, okay, I've got to go and review this ticket. I need to either write an exception as to why I don't want to go patch this CVE, or I need to go and patch this CVE. So they've got to make a decision no matter what, which slows down their ability to deploy that feature.
And I sense there might be a bit of friction there between DevOps and DevSecOps and the secure by default or secure by design. Would that be the case? And what you're trying to do, presumably, is essentially reduce that friction, are you?
Yeah. Essentially, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. And I think, yes, so what's happening is developers, if you think about DevOps as a basic practice, it is you want teams to be self-sufficient. You want them to be able to make tools and decisions about what technologies, what build systems, what software they use, because it's all about innovation and speed. Now, what's obviously happening is that we've seen that uptake of open source over the last 15 and 20 years. We're seeing that speed and innovation really being driven through that ability to make their own decisions. But as they start to use that software and the security teams start to scan it, because it is open source and there is lots of CVEs in open source today, what's happening is the security team will scan that, whether that's in the repository, whether that's in the build at runtime, and the security team is saying, hey, you need to go fix this because you're going to introduce risk into our environment. And yeah, that ultimately creates friction, because I think if you look at the evolution of security tools over the last 5 years particularly, they're giving unparalleled insights into what developers are using from a software perspective. And so I think that risk has become greatly elevated as people start to understand it, security teams start to understand how much open source software is actually being used and how they're going to go and fix it. Now, traditional security tools are going to they're going to be noisy. They're going to tell you there's lots of challenges and problems. Our approach is very different. We want to fix it before it becomes a problem. So we will update that vulnerability. We'll minimize the size of that container. And ultimately, your scanner is going to be a hell of a lot quieter because the images from Chainguard aren't going to have vulnerabilities in them.
And so, I mean, I think most people understand the risks that supply chain has in terms of cybersecurity. I mean, there are reports every day of new organizations being attacked through whatever threat vector. I mean, essentially, what you're talking about here is the introduction of another threat vector through the software supply chain, through a SaaS supply chain. What you're trying to do is essentially reduce that risk for organizations.
Yeah.
How did this all come about? To your founders and that? How did they sort of hit on this idea?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, this isn't new. Now, Chainguard as a company, is 4 years old, but our founders worked together for over a decade at Google, and they worked on a lot of the technologies that we use today to build our factory and automate the rebuild of these images and the signing and attestations and provenance and the SBOMs within the images that we ship today. And so things like SigStore came out of their time at Google. Things like the Salsa framework, which we use as a baseline to build everything in our factory, came out of that time in Google. So they were trying to solve this software supply chain challenge for many years before we ever thought, or I shouldn't say me, they thought of building Chainguard as a company. And so this isn't a new problem. We haven't been trying to solve this problem in the last 6 months. We've been looking to solve this problem for over a decade. And so to get to the point we're at, where we've got hundreds of customers and we've got thousands and tens of thousands of images and packages that we're monitoring every day, it comes through a lot of hard work and a lot of development and a lot of failing fast as well, I think.
You mentioned the factory. I'd like to sort of dig into that, and I'll come back to the Salsa framework and SigStore later, actually, because I think those are quite important areas to sort of to focus on. But let's talk to me about the factory and how the images are actually built. I'd be interested to understand how that process works in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, sure. It's continuous.
Okay.
That's probably the best way to describe it in one word. And so we're monitoring tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of repositories, of dependencies within the open source ecosystem. And so every time we see a change in any of those dependencies or any of those repositories, that triggers the factory into action. So the factory will rebuild that image, it will test that image, it will do all the attestations and provenance using SigStore, so we're signing all the artifacts, and then we'll actually rebuild and reproduce that image and then make that available to our customers. So that is seamless. And so seamless to a point of, so for an example, would be a new vulnerability is announced in a package. Many of our customers tell us that their scanners never pick up that vulnerability because our factory is in the background. There's no manual effort in there. We're producing that, we're rebuilding that image with that vulnerability fixed and actually making that available to our customers before their scanners ever pick it up. So that's the speed. And we're doing this at, I think our container images today, we have close to 1,800. But when you think of all the different tags within each container, so Python has, 96 versions today. So we're supporting all 96 versions. It's literally hundreds of thousands of packages that we're monitoring constantly. And then with libraries, which is our most recent release, is we do Java, JavaScript, and Python today. We're literally monitoring tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of repos for any changes within that. So we can do the rebuild, we can do all the attestations and provenance with SigStore, so we can make that securely available to our customers.
How does that work with SigStore then? Because I'm just interested to understand how that sort of provenance piece works. How does it sort of bed into it?
I mean, SigStore is literally it's the basis of everything we do. It provides all the signing of authenticity and all the authenticity of everything we do and where that image has come from. So literally, it's almost it helps produce the SBOMs as well. It is the basis of literally everything we do in terms of providing that input and that data to our customers to say, this is where we're getting these packages from. This is what we're doing in terms of the rebuilding. Here's all the different sort of packages that make up this image. And SigStore ultimately is driving all the signing of all that attestation in the background. So we can sort of stand behind that to say this is a secure by default image.
And that's presumably then, I mean, that's sort of written then into SLAs with customers that if, in terms of the authenticity of what the product, and you're essentially guaranteeing that it's as safe as can be.
Correct. Yeah. So we ship with no known vulnerabilities.
Okay.
And then we have SLAs that are associated to that. For criticals and highs, it's 7 calendar days. But actually, we're doing that in most circumstances in under 2 days, and actually in most of the time in under 24 hours. Hence my point about the scanners aren't even picking up these vulnerabilities, because we literally, the factory kicks into action and we rebuild without our customers even knowing.
And then the images themselves then, what are the metrics that you're using then to determine the security posture of those images?
Yep.
How can you explain that to me?
So we obviously we produce SBOMs with every image, so you can see all the packages make that image up. And then CVE counts essentially is the main one. So as I said earlier, we commit to having 0 known vulnerabilities within our images. But then obviously we look at things like the SLA adherence, making sure that we're delivering on that to our customers as well. And look, we want to look at things from a customer perspective as well. So how quickly are they able to consume these? How quickly are they able to upgrade from the Java image they're using today to using our Java image? So it's not only how we secure it and what we own in terms of an SLA. We want to make sure that there's also customers are being able to use that without having to make too many changes to the build process.
And what about upstream open source dependencies? How does sort of Chainguard handle vulnerabilities with them?
So we are, as I said, continuously monitoring. And the moment there has been an advisory, we won't wait for the distro, we won't wait for the maintainer to update. We will actually update, rebuild, test, and make that available. So we're not waiting.
Okay.
As I said, scanners often don't pick up those vulnerabilities.
Okay, and then earlier on you talked about the SALSA framework. Now, in my research, I won't pretend that I know everything what it stands for. Supply chain levels for software artifacts. I also discovered one of your founders was part of essentially the organization that set up the SALSA framework. So,
Kim Lewandowski, yes.
That's right. So what role do those standards play in the Chainguard strategy then? I mean, presumably if one of the founders is there, quite a lot.
Oh, it is the basis of everything we do. It is everything we do. We commit to SALSA level 2, and we're looking to actually upgrade that to level 3 as well. So level 4 is being the highest level, and I won't go into the details of each level, but literally everything we do, our entire build pipeline is SALSA level 2 and looking to move to level 3 as well. So that is the standard by which and the framework by which we commit to in terms of everything we do. And that adds to your earlier question in terms of how do we vouch, I guess, maybe in
assure
to our VMs, our images and our libraries is the SALSA framework is the basis of everything we do.
Yeah. And are you considered best in class? I mean, I don't want to talk about any of your competitors, but are you considered the best that's out there? I mean, you're bound to say that, I hope.
Well, of course, but maybe let's look at it maybe in a slightly different lens. I think for an organization who is building software at scale, and they have a low risk appetite. So let's say they're in a regulated industry like financial services, like healthcare, like government, and they all of a sudden want to be able to remove this noise. We see it in a lot of organizations. We see it more and more where as these new cybersecurity tools sort of expose how much software and open source software is being used, we're seeing vulnerability counts go up within most organizations. Yeah. And they get reported to the board. And there's got to be a conversation that goes on about what is our risk profile. And is our risk profile like our risk appetite? And does our risk and insurance cover us for this? Yeah. And we've seen more board mandates of literally being able to drop your vulnerability counts by 80%, 90%, 95% in some cases. And so if an organization wants to do that and they build software at scale, Chainguard would be their only option today.
I mean, interesting. A few weeks ago, I had a conversation with one of the heads of security team for a large global financial services organization. And one of the frustrations that individual described was that sort of vulnerability scanning you're talking about. And the fact that it was inherent upon their team to resolve it. They didn't have any mechanism for doing that. Now, I mean, that struck me at the time and very frustrating for that individual, but it struck me as incredibly time consuming and particularly, and I know everyone talks about automating the process, looking for being more efficient and all the rest of it, but that is precisely what you're there to resolve, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, it's you talked about, I think you asked me about friction earlier.
Yeah.
And that's the friction. The security teams are reporting more and more vulnerabilities. They're reporting more and more sort of security challenges. And ultimately, they don't own that. It's the people who are building and deploying that software are the people that necessarily own that. And if you but by virtue of the use of open source, and we see the security vulnerabilities that are appearing in open source just continue to go up and to the right. If the security teams who own the noisy tools that are saying, here are all the things that you need to go to fix, the developers are under a different pressure. They're under pressure to build software, deploy features, deploy products. And so that they're at friction, they're at a loggerheads. And so for us, security teams love us because we fix it at the root.
It reduces their workload.
Well, we rebuild it. We rebuild it source for them. We own the SLA around the patching of that software. And the developers love us because I don't know what the numbers are off the top of my head, but we released a developer survey recently, and it's one of their, they don't like patching software. It's not what they're paid to do. So if we can remove the friction from a developer side in terms of they get to focus on the things they A, enjoy doing, but B, is important to the business.
And everyone's happy.
Yeah, and the security teams don't have to keep opening tickets and chasing developers to go fix things. Yeah, that's a really simplistic way to describe it, but that's ultimately every organization has that friction today.
And so, what would a typical customer of yours look like? Well, I mean, because most organizations are using software, readily available software, but what would a typical customer of yours look like then in terms of size and scale?
No one ever
is there no typical customer?
No one ever likes this answer, but it's the truth. It's anyone who's building software at scale.
Yeah.
But I will do the nuances to that in terms of the urgency and the focus. So regulated industries, I think I touched on them before. So government, healthcare, defense industries, financial services. But we're seeing a huge uptake in AI companies, high-growth SaaS companies, anyone where infrastructure is sort of critical to whatever service they deliver, and they have, their risk appetite is low. It's a full spectrum.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's pretty much everyone.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, look, there are clear drivers around things like compliance. If you're building software and shipping it to a customer, organizations who have risk profiles that are unacceptable at a board level, and dropping CVEs gets them to where they want to be. So there's lots of different nuances to that in terms of the urgency and how quickly they're going to solve that problem.
Sure. I mean, actually, the compliance piece is quite a big area, I suspect, where you've got, we mentioned financial services, you mentioned government.
Yep.
There are presumably it just simplifies that compliance for those organizations and the thing areas like, we've mentioned operational resilience and presumably, these organizations are looking at this and thinking this is taking a whole heap of pain away for us.
Yeah, I think we're the sort of quickest way to get to compliance.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think about the frameworks that are particularly here in Europe are becoming more and more top of mind. Things like DORA, things like CRA, NIST2, and there's lots of different nuances within that, within the NIST framework, within certain countries as well. That is absolutely becoming a big part of the conversation. PCI DSS, obviously with the new standard at version 4, and things like FedRAMP. Any organization that wants to sell software into the federal government have to get a level of FedRAMP. And so today we meet and exceed all the requirements of those compliance frameworks. We want to stay ahead of them in terms of being able to help organizations quickly get to those compliance frameworks. But I think CRA and DORA from a EU perspective are becoming more and more top of mind. Yeah,
interesting.
Without a doubt.
And just sort of maybe going back slightly, what level of engagement do you have with the open source community? Because it sort of strikes me that you're probably unwelcome bedfellows in many respects because you're there. Well, they're creating all this stuff, putting it out there for the open source, and you're going, hang on a minute, we've got to make sure before it goes into our sort of customers that there's a level of assurance here. How are you? What is it? What level of engagement are you having with them?
I mean, we are an open source first company.
Okay,
it isn't a. We're not a. It's not a byproduct of what we do. Is like, as I said, we build from source every day, and so we contribute back to the open source community as well. Like, we secure the long tail of software that's out there. We contribute back in terms of tools. We contributed back a whole packaging system. Woofy OS is available within the open source community. So, of course, we are open source first. We feel there's got to be a level of contribution as well to help these maintainers and distros to be able to help fix themselves, whilst we do the scale and the really hard, messy things for our customers.
Yeah.
So it's got to be. There's got to be value in how we engage with the open source community, because we are open source first. That is our mantra. We don't trust binaries out there. We rebuild from the source of those images. It's really important to us, and it's a big difference for how we're able to provide the attestations and provenance as part of those SBOMs into our customers.
Of course, no conversation about cyber or tech these days would be complete if we didn't mention AI or ML. How do you see it affecting supply chain security in the near future?
Look, I think AI is, without a shadow of a doubt, already having an impact. I mean, just that ability, its speed on automating and triaging vulnerabilities and issues. But I guess the challenge is as we start to see it more and more widespread, it actually introduces a whole new tool chain, and that is open source based as well. And so it does potentially introduce more attack vectors and more risk as well. So I think you've got to think about it as you're going to see incremental, and we already see that today, incremental improvements in how we secure the open source world. But ultimately it does introduce potentially more challenges for organizations. And it doesn't fix securing software at its source.
Sure. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned the challenges. Where perhaps you'd like to describe, what are some of the biggest challenges that your clients facing when they're transitioning to Chainguard images? I'd be keen to sort of unpack that, because I'm sure, you're in sales, everything's, lovely and rosy.
Oh, of course.
But let's be honest, there are going to be some challenges. So perhaps you'd like to unpack that.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest issue is it's change management. People don't like change. And so using a Chainguard image instead of using the images they already know and love today is often, people think, what do I need to change within the way I build that? Like, do I need to change the build systems or the tools I'm using? We work with all the way they build containers today. How they build and deploy, we work within them. So it's more people thinking about, what else do I need to change? Do I need to think about security, et cetera? And I just think there's more that inherent, people don't like change.
Okay.
Where ultimately the change we're going to give them a step up in improvement in terms of security and velocity. And I think people sort of are reticent to change the way they build.
It's culture,
something.
It?
It is a cultural thing, very much so. And, I've heard Dan Lawrence, our CEO, say it a few times, like, when he's always involved at late stage with a lot of our customers, and he's constantly involved with customers. He's making sure we're measuring those incremental value they see from images. And I think the comment we see really regularly is, I thought it'd be harder. I thought it would take longer. But ultimately, it's not days. It should be hours to be able to adopt images.
Is that right?
Chainguard, yeah.
I mean, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? You go from zero to hero in a matter of hours.
Yeah, hours, definitely.
And that's regardless of the size of the organization?
You're not
doesn't
changing,
really matter.
You're not changing anything about the way you pull a container image and you build a container image and deploy that container image. No change to the way you're doing things today.
And then, talking about ROI then, how are organizations measuring ROI? Presumably it's risk reduction? But how do you measure that?
Yeah, look, I think initially it's the sort of really tangible things, which are CVE counts. Are CVE counts coming down? What's the adherence to the SLA around patching those, and also the mean time to upgrade. How long is it taking to sort of go from your existing Python image to the Chainguard image? But I think over time that starts to shift into what's the operating toll? Are we reducing operating toll? Are we giving time back to developers? Are we reducing the risk profile of the organization? Are we meeting compliance standards more quickly? So, and I think if you think about compliance as well, often it means access to new markets as well. You're deploying something new, you need to have PCI. How quickly do we get to PCI? How quickly do we launch that product? So I think revenue is also a part of that as well.
I see, okay. Let's sort of look to the future slightly. Where do you think software supply chain is likely to be in the next 5 years?
It should be invisible. I think if you look at the news today and the focus on this, you think about it doesn't take long to look at sort of CIO and CISO priorities. Supply chain is pretty much in the top 3 to 5 every time. Has been for a couple of years now, with all the recent press as well. And I say recent press, it's pretty much every other week now for the last couple of years. This is becoming top of mind, and so it needs to become invisible. People shouldn't have to think about this. It's like seatbelts. It should just be part and parcel. Like we've talked about it, the concept of people having to choose a base image, we need to move away from that. It's got to be invisible.
And that's in part that cultural change as well, isn't it?
It is, to a degree, yeah.
And what about the next wave of compliance regulations then? How is Chainguard preparing for that over the next 5 years?
Yep.
Do you see it?
Yep. So we've talked a bit about it. I've mentioned a few of them, so I won't talk to that. I think as I did say though, is we meet and exceed all of them today, and our architecture has the ability to be able to continue to maintain that pace. So we will always, use the standards like the SALSA framework going from 2 to 3. Yeah. So we're always ahead of what those compliance frameworks and standards are. So we can be a really quick and easy way for organizations to be able to achieve those.
Oh, I see. Okay. And what about, so you've been in this business a while, talked to many senior cybersecurity leaders.
Making me sound old, John. Don't do that.
Not at all, mate. Not at all. Yeah. But what advice would you give to security leaders trying to move their organizations towards that secure by default mechanism then?
Yeah.
What's the sort of advice you...
Don't try and boil the ocean. Focus on what are the things you're shipping today. So if you're shipping container images and VMs that aren't secure, pretty much everything you're shipping won't be secure. So start there. Start with base images. Start with VMs. Make sure they're secure. Focus on a service, one service, and measure. Measure the before and after. Show to the business the value that's delivering, and then start to expand those services. We see organizations expand very, very quickly once they start using Chainguard images, because the ROI in terms of that value is very easily measured and very quickly realized.
Yeah, cool.
So, but don't boil the ocean, one service at a time.
And I've heard this phrase, the doom cycle. What is it? It doesn't sound great.
The doom cycle, I think we've sort of touched on it a couple of times. It is, the doom cycle is, image pulled from, the internet, used to build a service or a feature. Yeah. Security scan it in either in the repository or they scan it at runtime. Right. It's a critical high vulnerability, potential has external exposure. Security need to go and create a ticket.
Right. Okay.
That ticket gets pushed to a developer. The developer's got to review that. They've got to either make a decision to, I need to patch the software or I need to write an exception. let's say they write an exception that goes back to the security team.
Right.
The security team review that exception. They put a risk profile on that. It potentially may need to go up the chain. That's the doom cycle.
Got it.
And so
I was right. It's not good.
no, it's not good. It's not good. And I think we ultimately remove that doom cycle.
Okay.
And it's interesting. We've sat down with a number of organizations over the last 6 to 12 months who have an increasing number and backlog of CVEs. And we've sort of tried to help them understand that vulnerability management process.
Right.
Because a lot of people don't have that sort of view at an organizational level. Like, how many people are involved? Like, what does that handoff process look like between security and engineering? It's very rare for an organization to understand what that is. And so we've actually sat with a number of organizations and mapped that out with the right level of sponsorship to go,
Okay.
how does it work? What are the handoffs? Who opens a ticket? What's the process within security incidents in terms of that vulnerability and how we handle that? And even if you're not patching vulnerabilities,
Right.
you are still spending hundreds of hours scanning software, opening tickets, doing handoffs. These are delaying deployments. You still have people looking at this stuff even if they're not going out and fixing
Sure.
it. So it's inherent waste of time.
Yeah.
The only way to describe it,
Absolutely.
even if you're not patching your software
Sure.
today, which surprisingly
Time is money.
organizations are. Exactly.
Of course.
Exactly.
So you also, along with Somerford, I understand, offer personalized open source vulnerability assessments. I mean, they're all free, aren't they? I'm assuming.
That wasn't a tee up, John. That was literally, that is natural. That's exactly what we're doing with Somerford. So yes, that is. That's important part of the partnership.
Yeah.
I mean, with Somerford's expertise in cybersecurity, it makes sense. We want organizations to understand how much time, effort, and energy they're putting into this, but potentially not solving the problem. And so working with Somerford to do that as part of the Chainguard offering makes a lot of sense.
Oh, you've just gone to the top of the marketing director's Christmas card list.
Thank you. Looking forward to it. Do they need my address?
I was sure be delighted because, of course, I was going to ask why Somerford, but I think you've sort of encapsulated that in your response.
Yeah, look, I mean, it was an easy decision. We made the decision to build, obviously, our partner go-to-market very early on. And so when we started hiring and bringing people in and building the program out, Somerford, we already, within the team, had a lot of experience working with them within previous roles. And I think the added benefit as well is the strength of Somerford with the cloud providers as well. We have a very close relationship with AWS, Azure, and GCP, as does Somerford. So that made it a lot of sense because I think the power of three is super important.
Well, that's really important. Thanks, mate. I think that probably concludes everything that we're going to talk about. We've managed to get through this discussion without mentioning the Ashes or rugby. But Rob, listen, thanks ever so much for taking the time for the chat.
We're not going to talk about that.
Well, I think we should move on, okay? Because it'll.
Well, hold on. You just won the rugby at the weekend, and justifiably, we didn't play well, but we hold the Ashes, don't we?
Wow, we'll see. It's only a matter of time, mate. Hopefully,
True.
But listen, thanks, mate. Really enjoyed it. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy calendar to help us out, and we look forward to working with you again in the future.
Absolute pleasure, John. Really enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you for your time.